All right, and last but most definitely not least, we have Mr. Shahzad Ilahi, who is a technical consultant to the government of Pakistan on specialising in alternative dispute resolution. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Professor, firstly, thank you for the opportunity. It's quite an honor to be here. I'm definitely going to echo what the rest of my colleagues have said on this stage, but I'd like to begin by what His Excellency, the Minister for Law and Home Affairs, Singapore, said in the morning. And I'm sort of trying to set the stage in the first 6 minutes of why this is important for Pakistan, and in the remaining 4 minutes, I'll explain what we've done already. So the Minister has said that we live in an age of global disruptions. And the other thing he said is that the global economic shift seems to be heading east very fast. Pakistan finds itself in the middle of both of these phenomena. So at this point in time, with disruptions and with economic focus, investment focus definitely shifting east, we are at this point in time looking to make our country as investor friendly as possible, which is one of our biggest reasons of pushing mediations. And when I comment on what we've done domestically, you'll understand the extent to which the government and the judiciary are working together to lay down very effective mediation ecosystems. The other thing that Mr. George Lim, of course, said, he's a legend, it was an honor being in his presence during this conference, but he said that if I am an investor, I need that safety of my investment before I apply, before I invest in a particular jurisdiction, and it's particularly true for developing countries such as Pakistan. Now, in terms of international law, we're signatories to the New York Convention, we're signatories to the Hague Convention. It only makes sense to complete the loop and be the signatories to the Singapore Convention. So that's primarily our rationale for it. Of course, time, cost, and security of relationships and more sustainable results, if I was to summarize. And you see, Singapore has done something remarkably well, and institutions such as SIDRA and SIMC, with the entire push from the government, the word mediation has almost become synonymous with the name Singapore. And we are borrowing best practices from Singapore at this point in time in order to very actively participate in this international mediation ecosystem. Now, in terms of, so I'm going to lay out a couple of facts about the country and then explain why this is so important to us. So, Pakistan finds itself at a very strategic location. We have two of the biggest economies in the world, China and India, to our east and the north. We have a direct route to Central Asia to our northwest. We have warm waters to our south, Gwadar, Karachi, ports that offer, which make this place strategically, location-wise, a very investor-friendly destination. In terms of resources, a country of 230 million people with an increasing women participation rate. Mineral rich, particularly in a couple of provinces, one of the largest coal reserves in the country. I think Pakistan has not yet been able to exploit this through international investment, primarily because our dispute resolution settlement system was not as good as it should have been. The Arbitration Act of 1940 was there. We did not have mediation in our domestic law prior to 2017. That seems to have changed significantly. So if I was to talk about it, and I'll talk about the convention as well. So the government and the judiciary are collectively working on creating ecosystems for both domestic disputes, commercial, and international. So in terms of domestic disputes, alternative dispute resolution in Pakistan is a provincial subject. So the bureaucratic hurdles of legislation and policy making times 4. The number of provinces in the country. But despite that, you see very successful mediation pilots happening in one of our largest provinces in Punjab. Through a judicial order, we had 30,000 cases referred for mediation, 15,000 of them resolved in a single year. So a very successful pilot there. In the province of Sindh, for example, the Sindh High Court being very supportive in terms of its judgment, but then the government on the side also building direct mediation routes so that companies, individuals for commercial disputes, civil disputes can go directly to mediations. And some of the results that we've seen are that if companies or individuals come into mediation directly, we've witnessed success results of up to 91%. Islamabad, the capital, 100 internationally accredited mediators, 4 private area centers, and approximately 400 cases that have come into these mediation centers referred through the courts and directly by parties just in the course of the last 7 to 8 months. We have alternative dispute resolution laws in all 4 provinces of the country. Gilgit-Baltistan there's a bill that was presented to the cabinet. It has received cabinet approval, which basically makes all civil and commercial disputes mandatory for mediation prior to institution of litigation. So that's just some of the things that we're doing. On the international end, we're doing two things at the same time. So we had a very, very outdated Arbitration Act. The government has now received a draft version of the revised Arbitration Act in line with Uncitral principles, international best practices, making enforcement of arbitral awards a lot more easier than it already was, which we foresee will be tabled before the National Assembly, hopefully in the next 5 to 6 months. On the mediation end of things, we are very close to signing the Singapore Convention. So I think within the year, you should hear the news that Pakistan will become a signatory to the convention. But more importantly, as the government sort of expands its arms and reaches out to SIMCs and CEDARs and CIABs of the world to help build that capacity, and we're trying to build that capacity indigenously as well, what we're also doing on the side is that our judiciary is actually really focusing on judgments that are very, very pro-settlement bias, very, very pro-mediation. From the Supreme Court in the last 2 months, you've had approximately 3 to 4 judgments in which, so for example, in one of the largest provinces of the country, the Supreme Court wrote an entire page out of the judgment convincing or basically mandating a public procurement agency to go into mediation before disputes such as this reach the court. You have one of the judgments from the Lahore High Court called the Moga Valley judgment, in which the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan has been ordered to create an indigenous ADR system to resolve commercial disputes before they come to court. So we see a big wave of mediation that Pakistan is very actively riding at this point in time. I think the Singapore Convention and its signing, so what I foresee is that when the government signs the convention, it's not going to take us a lot of effort to ratify it, because we're building our indigenous systems according to what the Singapore Convention said. In the conference that has just happened, a Chief Justice of a province, the Federal Law Secretary, a former judge of the Supreme Court, a judge from the Islamabad High Court were part of the official Pakistan delegation, which sort of shows you how serious the country is about the mediation ecosystem. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. As you were speaking, I was recalling at Singapore Management University, where we run mediation courses every year. We have judges in particular from Pakistan doing the course and getting themselves accredited. Yeah, and they've talked in different ways about all of the activity going on there. And I mean, I took a few notes here. I mean, legislation, pro-enforcement courts, and ecosystems being developed on a provincial level, but also now it sounds like the motivation for the Singapore Convention. I mean, you talked about making Pakistan investor friendly, and that being a big part of that, but also the big picture of international dispute resolution, right? And I guess mediated outcomes and their enforcement being the missing piece, along with those other conventions. And I think it's interesting to reflect on that also. All right, so there you have it, everybody. We have a number of questions. I'd like you to submit some more, and so we can get a discussion going in the 15 to 20 minutes that we have left. But let me start with a couple that are already here, but keep them coming. Please keep them coming. So I wanted to, I think we have a